If you knew what your true yes was and what your true no was in all areas of your life, would you be able to choose faster and easier? What futures would those choices create? Everyone is capable of connecting to their bodies in a way to have more exuberant and joyful living now and in the future. Now, here is your host of Choosing a Different Future with Siris.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Siris Rivas Verdejo. You're here for Choosing a Different Future with Siris. And I want to say big thanks to people who sent in questions. I'm already excited about today's episode. Our new listeners, our longtime listeners, and everyone that is following from all these different platforms, very much appreciate you. Hope you're enjoying the show. The topic for today's episode is talking about the birds and the bees. And I'm going to talk about what that even means because we have an international audience, and I want to make sure that euphemisms like that and different expressions that are more culturally based get clear. But I think you already know a little bit about what that might mean. I'm Siris, and I'm a body relationship coach, which is someone who communicates with bodies and communicates with your body so that you can connect with yourself better and your body. And then if you'd like, you can connect with other people's bodies. So this is going to be very much matching in with talking about the birds and the bees because the body's involved just a little bit. And then on top of that, I'm a family and child coach. And it's been amazing for me to get to empower children and families and educators and therapists around this topic because there are a lot of evolutions that have happened in the last couple of years with terminology, with different considerations, with how self-expression and sexual expression can show up. And so I've been very fortunate to be able to facilitate these conversations between parents, between educators, between children of all ages, and also within relationships. And then last but not least, I'm the creator of the Living and Dying Body Process, which is an energetic body process that invites you to connect with your body better so that you have living exuberantly your way. You get to awaken different energies in your bodies, maybe some that you may have shut down for different reasons, be it trauma or you feel like you need to because of age or some health issues, pain, things like that. And what this does is it unlocks it from your body so that you can have more of what's true for you and your living your way. So let's get into this topic today, talking about the birds and the bees. I'm going to go ahead and read the description here. I'm going to grab my notes because this is something that is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I know you're probably thinking, Siris, you say that about every topic. Well, I didn't become a speech language pathologist and a speaker because I didn't like to talk. I like to talk. So this is the description for today. Did you ever have the birds and the bees talk? How did it go? Over the years, I've been fortunate to have very candid, vulnerable, and insightful conversations about gender, sexuality, bodies, energy, intimacy, relationships, and communication. Yes, they're all connected. And they've been with parents and professionals, like I mentioned. So perhaps you've wondered some of these questions. These are some of the questions that we may get into. Or if some people in our live audience send in questions and they can type it into the chat, I will definitely give you dibs because you're here live. So make sure that you get your questions addressed. And then also, please feel free to send questions in afterwards. You can reach me at empoweringlightlanguage@gmail.com. You can message us through the show portals, through any way that you are connecting with us. You can comment and I will follow up with you as best I can. But some of the questions that I've often get asked are, how can I talk about my child's sexuality or sexual orientation without making them uncomfortable? What do I say or do when I catch a child doing something that isn't age appropriate and could have potentially problematic implications? That's a big one that I get from caretakers and educators, different teachers in daycares and schools, babysitters. And then I've been asked, I know my child is watching pornography. What do I do? How can I make sure my child is safe when interacting with other adults when I'm not around? And another possible question, how can I support my child's self-expression while protecting them from people who may not be accepting of their exploration? And that's been a big one that's been coming up more and more lately, because children are and young adults and individuals are dyeing their hair, are piercing themselves, are tattooing themselves way more than before. And depending on your point of view about it, you may have more ease or not with those conversations. So these are just a few examples of the diversity of all these possible places this conversation can go. And I'm super, super excited to have it with you. One of the things that invites us all to build more rapport and connection is by being willing to have these conversations, first and foremost with ourselves and with our bodies. So I'm going to go first into some of the prerequisites that I recommend for you to check in with yourself about to make sure you have if you're going to have a conversation about the birds and the bees. But first and foremost, what are the birds and the bees? So this came about as a story, gosh, I think around the 50s, but don't quote me on that. I know that it's a story that people use to describe what is copulation and sexual orientation, okay? So I want to make sure that you know that before we get started. And if you're interested in delving in deeper as you're listening to this conversation and you're like, I want to know more, I really would like to communicate better with my body. I would like to be more effective in my relationships, in knowing what I desire, in speaking to that, in communicating and connecting with people in a different way, in a way that honors me, that nurtures my body, that I have a clear voice and I'm confident and I'm willing to do some out of the box exercises and things that really gets me congruent and matching what I would really like to have. We have an upcoming event called Exuberantly You in Relationships. It's starting August 1st, and it's an eight-part call series. So you can check the replays, you can come on live, but we're going to be talking about all these different things where you actually have a voice and you get to be exuberantly you, like, whoo, super lit up in your relationships. And that is through a bunch of different aspects. So it'll take just maybe 15 to 30 seconds. Go ahead and open up the page, empoweringlightlanguage.com/exuberantly you. Have that ready for yourself so that you, as you go about your day, you're listening to this in the background, you can refer to this and make sure that you're aware of it. And I would register sooner rather than later so that you don't get distracted from getting something that would contribute to your relationships, your communication, and your connection with your body. Now, the other event that we have coming up that is going to help us take this birds and the bees conversation to a whole other level is another awakening class. We just had one in Indianapolis. It was phenomenal. We had the kids, we had adults, we had single people, we had partner people in there. And the next class, the theme is opening the doors to greater living. And if you listen to our earlier conversation of the episode called knowing what doors to open and which to close, we're going to take that conversation to a whole other level as well. And the details on that can be found at empoweringlightlanguage.com/living and dying. And it's about knowing what doors to open and which to close, because that's a key skill and to develop in life. Knowing what steps to take, what direction to head towards ensures that you aren't throwing darts in the dark. And this is going to be really key for our conversation today, because we're going to talk about today, when do we have these conversations? It's not just about, oh, we're going to have it willy-nilly. No, it's like, okay, is now the time? And when you have a greater connection with your body and you're willing to have these conversations that at first may be a bit uncomfortable, but then you get more and more comfortable with it with practice, then you get to actually have greater living. You get to have a connection with whoever you're having these conversations with that is greater than if you weren't willing to have those conversations. And the awakening class invites you to unlock this information from your body, unlock anywhere that you've locked in trauma around these types of topics, around intimacy, around copulation, around sexuality, all these different things, so that you can have living your way. Now, birds and the bees for my international audience, and even for some of you that maybe that wasn't how it was discussed in your family. Talking about the birds and the bees, well, this is a story that has been going on for decades and decades, and there are different variations of it. The story typically involves pollinating flowers, and that symbolizes male fertilization. And then the birds are laying the eggs, and then that symbolizes female fertilization. And so they make these different references to female ovulation, and people will tell this story instead of going into clear, accurate information that truly empowers children and young adults and adults about what could potentially be going on with their bodies. So this is just a fun way for me to label this episode, but we can literally talk about anything you all would like to talk about related to bodies and sex and connection and intimacy. And we're definitely going to go in deeper into this in the Exuberantly You in Relationships call series. So I want to give a shout out to the people who requested this as part of the podcast. There was a 5-part call that I did back in, June of 2018. And it was called How to Talk About Sex Without Ruining Your Kids' Sex Lives, or something like, or talking to your kids about sex without ruining sex forever, something like that. And I did this 5-part call, and funny enough, most of the people that were on the call did not have kids in their household anymore. They had grown children, or they were educators and they were working with kids, and they were asking all these different questions about that, more so than about, oh, how do I deal with this or have this conversation with my child that's in my home or that I see every other weekend around this topic. So it was really interesting. And part of what I noticed was that people realized that they had a lot of things that were making them really uncomfortable about this topic, or things that they thought that they had resolved. But then just by hearing the title, How to Talk About Sex Without Ruining Your Kids' Sex Lives, it was like, ooh, like just sit with your body for a second as I say that, and then compare it to when your body hears talking about the birds and the bees. Seems to be a lighter charge. And so a lot of us go to the things that aren't as direct or as accurate because we are really uncomfortable and we're resisting that discomfort, instead of realizing that maybe we could find a way to move through that discomfort to have greater ease with the topic. And would it be more empowering to you? Would it create more for you and the people that you would like to have these conversations with if we were willing to have that conversation? So big shout out to the person who asked for this call. And we're going to go into a completely different realm because a lot has changed since 2018 in the world, in bodies, in consciousness, in awareness of energies. And so we're going to look into that today. Now, there's a couple of prerequisites that we need, and we're going to get into this after this upcoming break. We're going to talk about the prerequisites of body awareness and connection, and also about knowing what you know and what you haven't been exposed to yet. Okay. And this is really important because these can be potential blind spots that will make these conversations all the more challenging, and they don't need to be. They can be a lot easier than what we've been told. They can be a lot easier than what we've experienced so far. And what if they could actually be fun and enjoyable? Like, I love talking about this. I love talking about bodies and sex and connection and rapport and intimacy and like, ooh, these energies that we're aware of and being more lit up about our lives. And so if we looked at it from that place, I wonder how much more ease we could have with this conversation. So it's time for our first break of the show. When we return, we're going to be talking about this way of connecting and about our potential blind spots, our potential prejudices. You are listening to Choosing a Different Future with Siris, with myself, Siris. on the Inspired Choices Network. When we return, we're going to continue this topic about talking about the birds and the bees, and we'll be right back.
Most people haven't been taught how to listen and partner with their bodies in order to create lives that include clarity, pleasure, ease, and connection. Tuning in to Choosing a Different Future with Siris, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and resources on how to use your awareness of bodies and energy to your advantage. Siris is a family and child coach and therapeutic energy worker who will guide you to get clear and acknowledge what's brilliant, magical, and a gift about you.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is the Choosing a Different Future show with Siris. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. Connect with Siris through her website, empoweringlightlanguage.com, or send an email to empoweringlightlanguage@gmail.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, everyone. I am Siris Raquel Rivas Verdejo on Choosing a Different Future with Siris. And today our show topic is talking about the birds and the bees. So before we went on break, we were starting to discuss how we may have some potential blind spots, some prejudices, or things that will affect our connection with our bodies, our awareness of that, and our connection to ourselves. And this is going to be really key. If you were to ask yourself, okay, am I aware of my body? How connected am I willing to be with my body today? With my body in my life? What awareness do you get? Do you get a yes? Do you get a sometimes? Or with certain people in certain situations? I invite you to, if you get not an absolute, if you don't actually get a woohoo, yes, for sure, all the time, then let's work on that. Let's practice it, because anytime you're not really connected with your body, there is a greater likelihood of you being at the effect of your awareness of other people's bodies. And we are all aware of other people's bodies, even if we don't acknowledge it. Even if it's simply as when we're talking to someone on the phone, and after we talk to them, they may feel amazing, and you feel like you took on all of their garbage, and you're like, ugh, you're not in the same physical space as them, but you were absolutely picking up on their body, what was going on. They got lightened up, they dumped it all on you, you took it on, and you locked it in your body, or you took it on and then you layered it onto your body, and then maybe you have to slough it off, just wash it off. Okay. But imagine that if we're aware of that when it's a conversation or when we're passing by someone. I remember I used to walk in the mall. I'd be walking. Oh, look at that cute dress, walking. Oh, look at that cute top, walking. Okay, cool. Oh, I'm going to have a sundae, a cookie. And the next thing you know, I'd find myself in pain or limping, not realizing that I was picking up on other people's pain and illness and bringing it into my body, unconsciously trying to heal them, unconsciously trying to help. And many of us are doing this, and then we say, oh, I'm in pain, and then we lock in the pain, or, oh, I have a limp now, and now we lock in the limp. Well, can you imagine that with someone that you're exchanging energy with during sex, during copulation? And I say copulation is when the body parts are brought together. That is a term and a distinction that I learned through Access Consciousness, which is a system of tools, of about 8,000 tools for helping you know what you know. And when you were looking at this, and we're looking at, okay, when we're in the same physical space with someone, when we're touching them, when we're being intimate with them, when we're opening ourselves up to so many different things, I recommend us noticing and acknowledging how aware we are of bodies, because how many of you, after you've had sex with someone, you felt worse, or you felt temporarily okay, and then maybe the next day you felt like a truck hit you, or you felt really sad and depressed or really anxious, and you thought that it was yours. And is it perhaps the person who you just had sex with? I definitely have been there, where I'm like, oh my gosh, they're really happy. They feel so much lighter. And I just took all this stuff from them, not realizing that they were an anxious person, or that they were insecure about their bodies during sex, before sex. And I don't really have those insecurities or worries. And then all of a sudden I'm in the same space as them. I just exchanged all this energy with them. And then I'm thinking things that I'd never thought of before. Like I was thinking of, oh, like my back of my thigh, what is that? And I was like, I don't have stuff with the back of my thigh. Where is this thought coming from? Or I'm checking out my belly, and I was like, but I have a flat belly. Like in that moment, right? I had a flat belly. And so I was like, who does that belong to? Where's that coming from? So one of the prerequisites to having these talks about the birds and the bees is to please acknowledge how super, 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 super aware you are of bodies, and how you're connected to bodies, even the bodies that you don't know, that you haven't been formally introduced to, the ones that you're maybe on another planet. I was talking to someone this morning about this, that you don't have to actually know where you're picking it up from to return it to them, to just say, okay, this isn't mine, bye. Okay, you don't have to hold on to it to analyze it and figure it out. It could be a lot easier than that. Yeah, I'm seeing some comments in the chat. We're definitely going to address them. Thank you so much. And then the other prerequisite that is super important before we go into these conversations, be it with little kids, with young adults, with a partner, with a friend, because we all have those friends, maybe you are one of them, where you bring up this topic of sex and bodies and romance and relationships, and they have all of this minefield of things that if you don't say it the certain way, or if you even go there at all, they shut up like a clam. Maybe they'll close up, or they'll be like, you better say it this way, or they yell at you and they get really reactive. So really recognizing, are you that person that's really reactive? Are you the person that shuts down about this? Are you someone that has certain things where you know this aspect of connection of bodies, but then there's a couple of other things that you haven't been exposed to yet, you haven't learned yet. And for a lot of us, we don't know what we don't know until we realize we don't know it yet. So I'm going to give a couple examples to see if this is something you'd like to know some more information about, and then we'll go from there. So one of the common ones that I get is a lot of people were taught about this about biology. They were taught about, okay, this is around reproduction. Recall your birds and the bees conversation, right? Recall when you were first exposed to sex, who it was that talked to you about it. And was it your parents? Was it a friend? A lot of people learn from friends. Was it a magazine or a movie? Maybe some combination of that. And when they came in and talked to you about that, were they talking to you from a place of, oh, this is about the vagina and the penis? Was it about copulation, where you're bringing these body parts together, and there was nothing about consent? There was nothing about pleasure. There was nothing about vulnerability. And what is this word intimacy that people throw around as if it's synonymous with sex, when it's so not the same thing? What was the framework that they gave you? And how many of you are still running from that same framework? Maybe it's time for that update. You know how like Apple and Microsoft, your virus scanners, all these different platforms, they'll say, hey, would you like an update? Would you like the 2.5 version? We're at now, some of you are needing the 2.5, and some of you are at the 10.8 version. Whatever it is it time to have an update on whatever framework you're using to communicate about this for yourself and your body, and also with other people? And this is one of the things that I talk about with my coaching clients is I talk to the parents if they're asking me to help them have these conversations with their kids. But a lot of times I have to actually start with the parents because they recognize, wow, I have all these blind spots. I have all these things that I have been totally avoiding knowing for myself. So then how can I talk to my child about it if I'm really not comfortable about it for me? They're going to pick up on that. So that question that I brought up earlier, where a parent asked me, well, how can I talk about sex and bodies and intimacy without making my child uncomfortable? Well, first, it's about you getting more comfortable with it, you breathing through it, you acknowledging that you are uncomfortable so that they know it's okay to. That's the vulnerability piece. But saying, even though I'm uncomfortable, I know that this is important. I know that I would rather you get this information from me than some erroneous source that gives you a skewed view, or that gives you a way of looking at this is not actually going to be effective and helpful for you now and in the future with your relationships and with your body. So yes, I might be uncomfortable, but I'm not going to avoid this, even though I'm uncomfortable. And this does a lot of different things. This is super important. If you let someone know this is uncomfortable, but I'm willing to go here anyway, it gives them an example. You're being an example to them of when other moments where they're uncomfortable, that they can power through it, that they can flow through it easier with practice. And do you get how powerful that could be for them, for a child that may be in a compromising situation around consent, where they don't feel comfortable, but they haven't gotten enough practice. They haven't gotten the models and examples from you, from, their peers, from their educators about what to do when they're uncomfortable. If they are seeing adults that are uncomfortable and avoid it, then that's what they will more likely replicate. But if they see adults that say, hey, you know what, this is a tricky topic. This makes me a little uncomfortable, but I know it's important. I know it'll create more for me to move through it. And we're going to get to more. We're going to get to have a greater ease with it as we practice this, as we have this conversation. Okay, they're more likely to then voice and have a voice and speak up when they're uncomfortable. When be it uncomfortable as in like, oh, we need to change positions, to uncomfortable to like, I'm not comfortable with where this is going. Can we stop? Can we stop? And it's all connected to, oh, I'm not comfortable with how you spoke to me in front of these people or in this situation. There's so many different ways of how this connects to voice. And I love that we're talking now, because in our next call, in our next episode next week, we're going to be talking about us having our fantastical voice. I'm planting a little seed for you about this now, and we're definitely going to talk about this more later. So the other thing that a lot of people sometimes have blind spots about with this topic is they may have some shame, some blame, some guilt around past experiences. And these aren't all trauma-based. I had a parent that was having all this blame and shame and guilt because they weren't around in these maybe formative years of their child's life when they would have wanted to have this conversation. And now they're trying to catch up with them later. And they were like, is it too late? Is it too late for me to revisit this and talk about it? It is never too late to get more information, to check in, to build rapport, to connect with bodies, and to make sure that it's accurate information given what's going on with that person right now. So if you have a point of view about it's too late, that is a blind spot. And I invite you to get rid of that blind spot and turn to it so that you can have ease with these conversations, no matter where you are in your life and whatever is going on and whoever you'd like to have these conversations with. Okay, so it is time for our second break. I'm loving this, girl. I am so excited. This has been amazing already so far. Can you tell I like talking about this? So in the second break, you're listening. Sorry, I'm so excited. So when we return, we're going to continue to talk about blind spots. We're going to continue to talk about connection. We're going to talk about intimacy. You are listening to Choosing a Different Future with Siris, myself, on the Inspired Choices Network. And when we return, we'll continue to discuss talking about the birds and the bees. We'll be right back.
Most people haven't been taught how to listen and partner with their bodies in order to create lives that include clarity, pleasure, ease, and connection. Tuning in to Choosing a Different Future with Siris, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and resources on how to use your awareness of bodies and energy to your advantage. Siris is a family and child coach and therapeutic energy worker who will guide you to get clear and acknowledge what's brilliant, magical, and a gift about you.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is the Choosing a Different Future show with Siris. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. Connect with Siris through her website, empoweringlightlanguage.com, or send an email to empoweringlightlanguage@gmail.com. Now, back to the program.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I am Siris Raquel Rivas Verdejo on Choosing a Different Future with Siris. And today our show topic is talking about the birds and the bees. Before we went on break, we were talking about our blind spots around this topic, our possible prejudices, and where we may need to lean into discomfort in order to have more comfort around talking about sex and intimacy, relationships, and more. So make sure that you check in with us in the chat and follow us in all of our different 250 platforms for podcasts and TV. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and download the ICN app, which is the Inspired Choices app. You can connect with us that way. You can connect with me at empoweringlightlanguage.com. That's my website. And I'm in all of the different platforms such as Facebook. So you can look at Empowering Light Language through Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. Very excited to connect with y'all. Always looking to have a greater impact in the world. And one of the people in the live audience was commenting, if you catch me on TV and you catch the video of this, you'll see that there's a map behind me. It's a painting of the world map behind me. And I love having it as a reminder to myself of the impact I'd like to have in the world. I'd like for these discussions to be way easier for as many people that would like to have these discussions. I'm really dedicated to children, families around the world, and for them to know that they're a gift and that there are strengths and capacity that they have that allows them to create a different possibility and a different future for all of us. And so if we were willing to have these conversations with more ease, I wonder what futures we could create together through our choices with this. So let's continue. I'm very excited about this. One of the things I'd like to touch upon that we started before the break was this piece about vulnerability. Vulnerability is super, super important to this conversation. And it's something that can be as simple as recognizing when something's a charge and heavy in your world, or it's bringing up some feelings and emotions, and just saying hi to that, just acknowledging, hey, this is what's showing up for me. And first say it to yourself. It may not be about starting this conversation with someone else yet, but being vulnerable with yourself and being like, this is where I'm at. This is what's showing up. Whew, okay. And softening and lowering your walls to looking at that while knowing that you aren't all those things, that you don't have to define yourself by the feelings that are coming up, the trauma, the emotions, the experiences. Great example. I work a lot with rape survivors. And when I was living in Savannah, for many years, I was a rape advocate, which is someone that is there for the survivors right after they've been assaulted and they're choosing to report it and get an exam, hopefully by a sexual assault nurse examiner, which is a SANE, SANE. And I would be there with the SANE, I would be there with the nurse as they were being examined, but I would also be there for them if potentially they had family that accompanied them or friends, to keep the families in the loop, to make sure that they were comfortable, make sure that they were fed, that they were hydrated. And then what I did in addition to that, that may be a little bit different and unique to me, I suspect that's the case given my conversations with the other rape advocates, is I would make sure that I was being this space of acknowledging what was going on in their bodies. I would be willing to connect with their bodies without taking on their trauma. But I would also soften my walls because it would remind me of when I was raped. I was raped in my early 20s, and working with the survivors every single time was an invitation for me to, oh, this is coming up for me. Okay, let me acknowledge it. Okay, let me move through it. Let it flow on through. It let me heal a little bit more each time. It let me be more comfortable with my experience and not letting it define me. And then I could speak to the survivors and say, hey, this isn't all of you. There's hope. You can have a successful career. You can have wonderful relationships. This doesn't have to be everything that you are moving forward. And when it was appropriate and when the person was receptive to it, if I could get them to giggle, if I could get them to laugh and make a joke, oh my gosh, if you haven't recognized the power and the healing potency of laughter, get silly with it in these conversations. That's another recommendation I have. If you're talking about the birds and the bees, you're talking about sex with kids, with young adults, with a partner, with friends, whoever, get silly with it because sex is silly. It's funny. The noises are silly. The smells are silly. The ways that you contort and move around, it's like Twister, like it's silly. It's a game. It can be really fun. And so what if you could laugh more around that and have more whimsy with it? And so if I could get these survivors who had just had, some of them, beyond atrocious things happen to them, to laugh a little bit, to be a little bit irreverent, not disrespectfully, but in a way that reminded them of the joy of living, that is super, super powerful. And so when you're willing to have that vulnerability in these conversations, it can create a lot. It invites people to, again, like we mentioned before this last break, you can be an example to them of, hey, let's have fun with this. If it's not enjoyable and pleasurable, you would do it for what reason? Okay. And this is one of the things that a lot of kids these days are not hearing. If they're only hearing about biology and reproduction, they're not getting the message that they should make sure that they're enjoying what they're doing, that they don't need to force themselves to do anything that isn't enjoyable. And a lot of them are. And given the conversations I've had with young people right now and their parents. So when can you have these talks? As early as 5 years old, really. Like I've even had some advanced 3 and 4 year olds already start to have these conversations around bodies. And I recommend being clear and accurate with the terminology that you're using. Please don't use the snuffle puff or your flower or your frog, there's so many, every country has a different terminology that they'll use as a euphemism to different body parts instead of using the accurate, clear terminology. And there's a lot of reasons why that's the case. I'm not going to go into why people do it instead of the accurate and clear. I'm going to talk about the benefits of the accurate and clear because we don't have as much time to talk as I did when I did the 5-part call on this. Okay. So some of the benefits. Well, one, safety. If you're using terminology that everybody knows, then if something is reported, like a child is saying, oh, this person touched me on my butt, they touched me on my vagina, they touched me on my breast, everyone will know what that is, versus they touched my flower, they touched in Spanish, because I speak Spanish too, that's my first language. they touched the pompis. Pompis is like a region. They don't really know, depending on the dialect, what exactly they're referring to. So for each of us, there are different terms that we were told or that we've heard of that maybe people are using and said. And it's one thing if you know it as a joke and it's between you and your friends, but it's another thing when you are trying to empower and educate a child. And this is the first platform for their interactions with their body and with other people's bodies. You really want to set the stage for their success, for them to be able to communicate effectively, for them to feel confident in what they're saying. Because if you say a word and people are like, huh? Then you start wondering, is it me? Did I say the word incorrect? Like, what's going on? And they start doubting themselves when they don't need to. You could just avoid that by using the accurate, clear terminology. Okay. Yeah. We got some comments in the live chat. Yes, drives me nuts. Clear language is so important for safety. And yes, laughter is super powerful and healing. I agree. So here's the other piece too. There's safety, but then there's also about making sure you're on the same page. So this is really important when it comes to even terms that you would think everybody has the same definition about. I can't tell you how many times I work with different couples and they're doing partner coaching with me and relationship coaching. And one person says, oh, well, intimacy, big one. Oh, when I say, let's get intimate, I mean this. And the other person's like, really? I had no idea. When I thought when you said intimacy, you meant this other thing. And it creates so much confusion that could be avoided. So at the beginning of relationships, super important. In the middle, when you've been around each other for a couple of months, a couple of years, very important. And when you've been together for decades, don't assume that you're still on the same page about what you mean about certain terms. And there's new terms coming in all the time. There's new terms coming in all the time. I had a conversation with someone recently about the difference between gender fluid and transgender and gender queer. And these are these terminologies that are coming up right now that a lot of people don't know what they are, what to do with it, how to respectfully ask what is the way that the person identifies. It could just be as simple as, how do you identify? How would you like me to address you? And it's the pronouns, which more and more people are doing. What are your pronouns? Very simple question. To how do you identify? And that could be, how do you ethnically identify? How do you racially identify? How do you sexual orientation identify? Whatever way you want to talk about it, just gently, with respect, ask this. And you could even posit it like, this is a little uncomfortable for me, but I really want to make sure I respect you and I'm using the terms that you would like me to use. So how do you identify? You see, that's the vulnerability piece. With all of these different things, you can make sure that you are, yes, connecting with your body, acknowledging that you're connecting to other people's bodies, noticing what your blind spots are, targeting what you would like to educate yourself more about. And we're going to go into some of the questions that people have sent in as well after this upcoming break. But this is really, really key, because one of the things that with this as well is, if we're willing to use this clear terminology and we're willing to educate ourselves on all this new terminology coming up, then it opens the door for more people that we can connect to, more people that we can have friendships and relationships with, more people professionally that we can have as potential clients, because they'll see that we are open to them, that we are honoring their journey, and that we are not resistant to all of the changes that are in the world. The companies that resist change die. We've seen it over and over again. We need to evolve and change with the times for ourselves personally, and if you have a business, for your business as well. And we're seeing many examples of that in the world. Okay, so it's time for our third break. Gosh, the time is flying with this, y'all. Can you feel it? I love it. When we return, we're going to continue to talk about this topic of birds and the bees, including intimacy, including some examples of how people are choosing a different future with this topic, so that you can get some ideas on how this may work for you. And so you are listening to Choosing a Different Future with Siris, with myself, Siris, on the Inspired Choices Network. When we return, we'll continue to discuss talking about the birds and the bees. We will be right back.
Most people haven't been taught how to listen and partner with their bodies in order to create lives that include clarity, pleasure, ease, and connection. Tuning in to Choosing a Different Future with Siris, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and resources on how to use your awareness of bodies and energy to your advantage. Siris is a family and child coach and therapeutic energy worker who will guide you to get clear and acknowledge what's brilliant, magical, and a gift about you. This is the Choosing a Different Future show with Siris. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. Connect with Siris through her website, empoweringlightlanguage.com, or send an email to empoweringlightlanguage@gmail.com. Now, back to the program.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I am Siris Raquel Rivas Verdejo on Choosing a Different Future with Siris. And today our topic is talking about the birds and the bees. And before we went on break, it's been a lot. Before we went on break, we've been talking about connecting with bodies. We've been talking about terminology, the importance of being really clear and accurate in our communication, of learning about our blind spots and being connected with our own bodies in addition to other people's bodies when we're having these conversations. So this is so interesting. One of the things that I see in the chat says, I must have been uncomfortable when my kids were young and talking about sex. Today I go to talk about it, and every single time they are uncomfortable, not me now. All right, we've evolved. And I wonder if they're really uncomfortable. This is so funny. There's a lot of posing that a lot of kids do, where they're like, oh, I can't believe you're talking about this now. Oh my God. And they're seeing these tropes over and over again, these different cliched scenarios in like different TV shows and sitcoms where like when a parent talks about this, it's supposed to be horrifying and you're supposed to be really uncomfortable. And so they mimic that. And so a lot of times when I see a kiddo respond that way, or a young adult respond that way, I'm like, are you really uncomfortable? Or are you just like pretending? And a lot of them go and joke around, and they say, oh yeah, it's not that big of a deal. It's like, whatever. It's like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. Like, you're fine. You're if they really are truly uncomfortable, it's like, well, that just shows that we just need to practice in talking about it more so that you get more comfortable. And they may or may not be open to that, right? But it's like, what would you need so that you're more comfortable with this? I have some parents too that have told me that the way that I've helped them frame the conversations has helped them have more ease with it, because a lot of the discomfort that they were perceiving in their kids was actually not discomfort. They were mislabeling it. It was irritation. It was, oh, I already know all this. Why are we even talking about it? Yeah, the comment in the chat, I can see their eyes rolling now. Yeah, exactly. They're just like, let's look at and pay attention to what we're labeling these interactions as, because it may not actually be discomfort, but we're projecting this expectation of discomfort onto the situation and onto them. And they may be then picking up on it because they're connected to your body and they're connected to your reality as well. Or they may be picking up on these, like I said, these examples of how these conversations usually go in the world and in other people's families and things like that. I was very fortunate. I had very candid conversations with both my parents for a very young age, starting at 5, mainly out of necessity, because I was being exposed to things that were way beyond my years, riding the bus with like 8th graders that were super advanced and super doing things that I was like, well, when a 5-year-old comes to you and it's like, Mom, what's an orgy? You gotta start talking about some things. And they were talking about orgies and threesomes on the bus. So my mom was like, got it. My child is being exposed to a lot of things. I cannot avoid this conversation if I would actually like them to have clear communication and know what's actually relevant to them and what's not. And guess what, 5-year-old? Orgies and threesomes are not relevant to you right now. Okay. Like, so interesting. So if you don't have these conversations, who would have them for your child instead and with your child instead? One of the things that I would really love is I would love for there to be futures in the world where people are willing to have these conversations and they're clear about it. And it's like drinking water. It's just the significance to it, the charge of it is just not there. And people recognize that it's not only okay, it should be an energetic priority for there to be consent and there to be pleasure and there to be play and there to be connection. Even if it's just for a one time and done situation. I'm not saying that you have to create a whole relationship with every person that you choose to bring the body parts together and copulate with. You could also have that play and whimsy with one night stands. And a lot of the adults that'll come to me, they're wondering, well, how do I go from one mentality of having a relationship, wanting a relationship, to having a one night stand, if that's what I'd like right now, or casual dating and moving back and forth? What if it wasn't one, the other? Like there's these limited box of criteria and choices. What if it's actually more than that? So I would love for all of you to check out the Exuberantly You with Relationships 8-part call. Come and join us in our next episode, which is having our fantastical voice. The description for it, I'm going to read it, is what would it be like for us to have our fantastical voice? What would it create for us and for the world? What if we didn't rely on the verbal or any particular language to express ourselves and instead showed up as more of ourselves? So when we have and own our unique voice, it changes everything. Discerning between truth and lies is faster and easier if we'd like to be truly seen and truly heard. Expressing ourselves effectively in a way that honors and respects us and others increases the chances of that exponentially. The walls to knowing ourselves come tumbling down, and we can more clearly know what we desire and take action to create it. Language, communication, and self-expression are key to building a life that is congruent with what we have been longing for. So in the next episode, I'm going to shine a light on where we have been hiding and shutting ourselves down so that we can recognize the value of what we bring to our lives and to the world. And this also relates to today's topic, right? If we had our fantastical voice, how much easier would talking about the birds and the bees, talking about our true desires and what we really would like to have in our relationships, how much easier would that be? And then how much easier would it be for us to bring in those people that match that, the people that are nurturing, that are kind, that are fun and adventurous and open, or whatever other priorities you have for the people that you would like to draw in your life, that maybe those that are showing up already and you'd like more of that, or maybe it's those that you haven't shown up yet in the way you know is possible, and you would like to have them show up yesterday, which is what I like all the time. So make sure to catch us next week on Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern US. Thank you so much for being here. And make sure to check out the Exuberantly You in Relationships, which is at empoweringlightlanguage.com/exuberantlyu. And our next awakening classes to awaken you to have more of your voice and more ease with intimacy, energies, all of this yum, by going to empoweringlightlanguage.com/living and dying. This has been an amazing discussion. I'm so looking forward to continuing this and connecting with you next week. And if you haven't been checking our previous episodes, I recommend for you to do that, because they're all building and connecting together, just like all of our choices are connecting together to create a different future. And so what futures could we create given our choices together today? And if we are willing to acknowledge that, and we are willing to have that our unique way individually, then what world would that create? I think it would be a world that I would like to live in. How about you? Until next time, everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Choosing a Different Future show. Siris returns Fridays at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Mountain, and 7 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Until then, keep choosing what will work for you and your body, your own unique way honoring what will work for you.